All right, Jack.
Welcome to the chat. This is Jack Spillane, and I'm from the New Bedford Light. The chat is our weekly video discussion forum. Today we have the second half of a discussion we're having with pro and con on the nip ban in the city of New Bedford. Last night we had two environmentalists on, and today we have Mark Freitas, the owner of Freitas's package store in the South End, as well as several stores in Fairhaven. And we have City Councilor at Large Ian Abreu, who has been an opponent of the nip ban that was passed a few weeks ago by the licensing board. I always say that there are two good sides to every issue, and we want to hear the other side of this issue. Even though I myself have written a column in favor of the ban, I also realize that business is always a big priority. Businesses pay the taxes in the city, and their concerns need to be paid attention to. So welcome, Ian, and welcome, Mark. Why don't we start off with giving you both an opportunity to make some points that you want to without me asking questions.
I guess I'll go first, Ian. Actually, it's Mark Riley from Freitas Package Store. One of the issues.
Did I say Mark?
Yeah, you said Mark Freitas. Mark Riley.
Mark Riley.
One of the issues is I'm glad you had the ladies on yesterday and giving us a chance to speak. When I wrote a piece for the New Bedford Light last week, the main thrust was everybody should be at the same table on this issue. It's great that you're bringing this to light, but it really involves everybody. It involves the city council, the mayor, businesses, citizens groups, the environmental groups to fully understand what the issue is, because the issue here is really complicated. The idea of just canceling NIPS is oversimplifying, thinking that that's going to solve all of our problems with trash and some of the issues that we have in the city. So I appreciate you doing this, and that's really why I'm here today, is to try and encourage that this is the first step in more dialogue to bring everybody together, because there are some solutions that are out there, but everybody has to understand where the other party's coming from so that we can all get to that common solution.
Mark, you said something just before we went on air, and that was that you didn't feel that your point of view on this issue and the point of view of the environmentalists was that far apart. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, the issue that's being portrayed that if you ban NIPS, it's going to solve the trash problem in the city, and it's going to be the major difference that's really going to be noticeable. And when you listen to them last night, I mean, they said that the bottle bill, and just to be clear, what they're talking about on the bottle bill is not to add 5 cents to anything. It's to change the existing bottle bill to 10 cents and then add other things to it. Water bottles, juice, nips, a lot of the, as they said last night, all those non-carbonated beverages that they're finding in their pickups. So we are kind of in the same place. It's just how you get there. You know, there are some solutions that are out there of what some other communities have done with posing an environmental fee and helping with some of those cleanups. We've talked to some of our distributors about they'd be more than happy to provide more trash cans to the city. There's a way to bring more revenue into the city for the city to be able to hire more people for cleanup. But the overall overarching issue is education. When the bottle bill came out in 1982, there was a tremendous amount of education that went along with that. Give a hoot, don't pollute. The Indian standing on the beach with a tear coming down his face, looking at all the pollution. Times have changed, and the education needs to begin again. And that's part of this whole process of cleaning up. So we need to bring resources, we need to bring funds into the area so that we can attack litter and trash comprehensively, not one by one, not choosing the winners and the losers. It needs to be a comprehensive solution where everybody's involved, and let's really make a difference for the city of New Bedford.
All right, Councilor Abreu, what say you?
Good morning, Jack. Thanks for having me on and the opportunity, and good to see you again, Mark. A lot of the points that Mark had driven home are analogous to my thoughts on the matter. And look, the folks on, I even hate saying the other side because of this debate, because a lot of the environmental group and the environmentalists who, and the groups who are involved in this, I consider them my friends. Russ Watton and Lynn Koish at Operation Clean Sweep. They're good people. I volunteered there. And for the record, I agree that we have a problem with litter in the city of New Bedford. It's a statewide issue. It's a national, it's a worldwide issue. Just because we agree that there's a problem with litter, it doesn't mean that the silver bullet in this is just to ban nips. I mean, because the reality is that we have trash all over this city, and nips are just a small portion of that. And whether it's water bottles, fast food containers, and all the things of the such. I mean, the reality of the situation is that our mayor, for better or for worse, doesn't believe in trash bins throughout his beaches. He doesn't believe in trash bins throughout highly densely populated business districts in the South End or in the North End on Acushnet Avenue, or in areas like on Cove Road or Cove Street in the South End. And he doesn't like the way they cosmetically look. So when you instruct your Department of Public Infrastructure to either yank bins or don't erect more bins, what do you think is going to happen? And it's not condoning people littering. I'm not saying that, but when you don't have trash bins in the public way, these sort of things are going to happen, period, end of story. And of course, Jack, from my years, over 10 years with the Chamber of Commerce, being the director of business there and owning a small business now here in the city of New Bedford, for which I employ people now. I'm cut from the cloth of always wanting to support small businesses and support the economic vitality of this community. I know Mark has given the statistics, and many others have in his industry as well. This could be perhaps a death knell to his small business and the small businesses all throughout the city of New Bedford. It's not even about folks like Mark and some of the other package store owners. In particular, it's about the folks of whom they employ, my constituents, those who live in the city of New Bedford, who are working for Mark on a second or third job, making 18 or 20 bucks an hour. I'm not sure what you pay for an hourly wage, Mark, but I'm sure it's around there. It's at least 15, obviously, and it's up from there, I'm sure. So these kinds of part-time jobs or even full-time jobs for which Mark employs the great people of our city, this is what helps them make ends meet. This is what helps them be able to pay their mortgage and pay their bills and stay afloat economically and financially here in the city of New Bedford. And I have the concerns about that. And I have concerns about what the trickle-down effect's going to be. I do think a deposit bill is something to talk about for sure. And my understanding is one of our state representatives, Chris Henricks, did file a bill last legislative cycle about this issue. I was told throughout my research and speaking with Chris, it's still in committee, has not been punted out to the floor for a vote or to go to a conference committee when it goes to the floor. So there you have it. There seems to be no appetite on Beacon Hill. So I think what Mark said is absolutely correct. The mayor says, well,
a bit, Ian, because we're at a half hour today, and I have a number of questions I want to
all
get
right, let me just finish my point, just 10 more seconds. So I think Mark's correct when he says the mayor says, well, if a bill gets passed, I'll rescind it. He knows that's not going to happen.
Okay, no filibustering on the chat. So the bill has passed. It's supposed to go into effect 90 days, which ironically is just before the election. I'll just let that hang there. Is there any way to stop it, or are we in the area of court challenges, or in the area of trying to get state legislation or something to reverse it? Maybe city legislation. Either one of you.
Do you want to start, Mark? And I can tell you what the council is planning on doing.
Yeah, I'll let you talk about that aspect of it. We're hoping that the city council is going to get involved, and if they can't stop it, at least be able to put a pause on it. And if they can't, then yes, there'll be some legal action. One of the things that's been misunderstood about this is everybody talks about what happened in Chelsea. Let's just clarify what happened in Chelsea first. Chelsea was the first place to institute the ban. It took several years to do it. It was initiated by the city council. I believe it was unanimous. If it wasn't, it was very close. The police were involved. The police handed over the names of 20 or 30 or 40 people to the local liquor stores, saying we're having an issue with these people. We'd like you to stop selling to them. They refused to do it. So the city felt they had no other choice but to institute that. That's not what's taking place here. The other difference about Chelsea too is it was asserted that the stores in Chelsea didn't lose any revenue. That is true. The ban took place in 2019 in Chelsea, and in 2020 they didn't see any drop in sales. But what's amazing is when Chelsea passed the ban in 2019, from 2019 to 2020, I saw an increase in sales because we had a thing called COVID. So all the statistics that everybody keeps citing about Chelsea are so skewed that everybody needs to know the facts. all those ambulance runs went down. A lot of that had to do with those 20 or 30 individuals that Chelsea said don't sell to anymore, now had a problem buying. The other was bars and restaurants and those kind of places were all closed, and there were curfews for everybody. So yes, DUIs went down, and alcohol related accidents went down, and all those things went down, but they went down in every city in Massachusetts. So really, to point at Chelsea is, if we're going to point at Chelsea, let's say how this started and how it passed. It passed because the city council wanted it to pass, not because the mayor had the licensing board.
I'm a little confused because I thought that the mayor on WBSM had said that both Chelsea and Newton passed it with licensing boards. That's not correct?
No, that is correct. But I don't know about Newton, but Chelsea passed it with the licensing board with the endorsement of the city council.
Okay, all right. So if there was court action, what would it be based on?
Several issues, one of which is the idea that they're giving us 90 days to sell through all of our existing inventory is just ludicrous. Some cities and towns gave over a year. Fairhaven passed it in May. They're giving until January. At the meeting when they announced the ban was going to go into effect, they didn't even say that it was going to happen, when it was going to happen. They just passed it. And then we had to find out on the news the next day. They made a conflicting statement and said all the stores are going to be given time to sell through their existing inventory, and it will take effect November 1st. So they didn't reach out to any of the stores to find out what kind of inventory do we normally carry, how long will it take you to sell through it. So it's a very disingenuous statement. So we're hoping that the city council, if it can't be stopped, they can at least pause it to allow the stores not to be stuck with inventory we have to throw away.
Okay, Ian, what's the council up to?
Well, one thing that we have filed for our meeting on August 17th, it's a motion by myself, Councilors Pereira, Giesta, and Carney, and I'm reading it verbatim, so that's why I'm looking off screen here, but I want to make sure I have the correct language that we had put together with our city council attorney, Attorney Garatowski, to make sure we had it correct. So the motion that we have on our August 17th meeting, we have two of them. One of them is requesting that the licensing board opens a public hearing once again at their next meeting to rescind Rule 48 of the City of New Bedford's rules and regulations for those licensed to sell alcoholic beverages both on and off premises, with a referral to the licensing board. And the second motion we have is by the same four people, myself, Pereira, Giesta, and Carney, and I believe Councilor Oliver has signed on to it as well, and I believe others are as well, or have. I don't have all the names in front of me, so some of my colleagues who may have co-sponsored it, if I didn't mention you, I apologize, I just don't have it in front of me. We're requesting that the Committee on Appointments and Briefings meet with New Bedford business owners, so folks like Mark and many others, requesting that New Bedford business owners and residents come together to discuss the issues surrounding the licensing board's Rule 48 ban of alcohol sold in less than 100 milliliter containers. So we've got two. So one is to get this back to the licensing board for them to reconsider via a public hearing. And the other is to get both folks to the table, like Mark talked about, to talk about the issue so we can be adults about this and have a bipartisan discussion.
What's the politics of this? Do you have any hope that this will actually be reversed by the licensing board?
I don't know. I mean, we've seen other controversial procedures put in place, that's been rescinded by the administration, like the park board situation when it was put in, for the handicap parking at Noah's Park Playground. There was a lot of public outcry about that. I'm not comparing that to this issue, but I'm just saying there have been instances where boards or commissions have made controversial decisions, and the court of public opinion and the outcry from the constituency and the populace was so great, those decisions were reversed. So we'll see what happens here. We want to get it back before the licensing board, and we hope for a big turnout again before the licensing board. And I hope the decision, even if it's not reversed, at least it's tabled and we put a pause on it till we figure out that middle ground solution. Because Mark and I both agree, litter is a problem in New Bedford. We're not climate change deniers. We're nothing of the sort. We know it's a problem, but let's work together to find a solution.
It is a tough issue. I'm not sure if it went to a vote of the public, just from the people I talked to, that the ban wouldn't pass. So it is a tough issue. But give you a little bit of a hard time. Plastic in the oceans, we've all read about. It's a serious problem with there being a huge, miles-long swirl of plastic in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. These nip bottles and other plastic bottles are getting in the storm drains. Ian, I'll put you on the spot a little bit. I noticed early on your Somo syrup switch from plastic bottles to glass bottles. I, for one, bought a bottle, and I like the things in glass because I think it tastes better. Is there any? I asked the women from the environmental groups, Operation Clean Sweep and Be the Solution to Pollution, if there was any effort to would it be better to go to glass? Is there any possibility that going back to glass nip bottles would be a solution?
I couldn't answer that. I mean, with my business, I went to glass because it's more environmentally friendly, even though it costs me more in my bottom line. So I'm not sure about what the cost would be to the liquor companies or to the distributors or to even Mark's bottom line, because of course those costs would be shimmied on to Mark as a business owner, right? For these companies going into glass. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. Mark may have more insight on that than
You want
me.
to talk in the industry, Mark, about that?
No, and to think that we could solve a local problem by having multinational companies try and play into this really isn't the solution, because there's really no appetite for that on their level. But there are a lot of solutions that are out there, and that's why we just want the opportunity for everybody to get to the table. You know, for one, our distributors have said that they'll give the city of New Bedford $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to buy more trash cans. They'll pay for them and provide them to the city. With no cost to the city. City will have to maintain them and to empty them. But if we are lacking trash cans around the city, there's one possible. They've also talked about
that is not a small cost of emptying trash cans. I live downtown in Custom House Park, where they claim they empty them every day. The barrels are frequently overflowing. So and when you ask about that, what they say is that our workers are straight out now. If you're going to put more barrels in, you have to have a budget to pay for the workers to empty them. Ian?
Well, that's why you work that into your trash contract, okay? Because the downtown bins were serviced by Harvey Waste, and now the bid has gone to Capital. It's on Capital, so you just negotiate that out in your trash bid in your RFP every couple of years when the contract comes due. So I don't want to hear that we're putting the burden on DFFM or DPI to clear out the bins. Just put it in the bid. We're already paying Capital Waste $8 million.
No, I'm just saying it's money. It's money. Where does the money come from?
I have a solution to that. So in Connecticut, there's an environmental fee of 5 cents per nip that is charged as state law. What our distributors have said that they're willing to do is they're willing to use New Bedford as a test case. Although it is not into state law, they're prepared to add 5 cents to every nip that is shipped to the city of New Bedford. And that 5 cents, write a check back to the city of New Bedford twice a year, which by good estimates is somewhere around $300,000 that could come right back to the city of New Bedford, that the city could use for education. They could use to hire more personnel. They could hire to clean up all plastics that are on the beaches, that are on the streets. So it could be used at the discretion of the mayor and others to really make a difference for trash. And what we're hoping is people like myself and Councilor Abreu and the environmental groups and the mayor can all stand together and agree that trash is a problem, and let's everybody in the state pay attention to what New Bedford's doing, because we're going to try something that no one else has tried yet. Then and we're going to try and fund it in a different way and make it happen.
Have you floated this idea to the mayor yet?
The mayor has indicated in a couple of interviews that we had a brief conversation 5 years ago, which was true, as we were passing outside of my store. I called him just before the vote was taken on Tuesday or the Wednesday. He called me back on the Friday and had indicated to me that there was no more talking that was going to be had. He said that he couldn't do something like this because he doesn't have the authority to do it. I've talked to my distributors, and my distributors said they will take this on their own, and they will impose that 5 cent environmental fee, we'll call it, and write a check back to the city.
Who
I can tell
who are those distributors?
Martinetti Liquors and Horizon Beverage.
Okay, so that I mean, on the surface, that sounds like a reasonable idea. I do think that the people from Operation Clean Sweep and Be the Solution to Pollution said that you can't legislate people not throwing out trash. They just litter. Unfortunately, some people just don't have that environmental consciousness, and that it's always going to be an uphill battle. And they really believe that banning plastic is the only solution. And when you're talking that way, it's not just nip bottles, but it's plastic water bottles, non-carbonated bottles, as they said. So it does seem to me that long term, at least, there's going to have to be another solution. Mark, can I ask you? I know it's hard to talk about proprietary information, but the number has been thrown around that 15% of your business is in NIPS. It's not just street people living in the downtown. I know we do have a problem with street people buying NIPS, but it's not just street people that buy them. What kind of money are we talking about you losing, and how much do you pay in taxes every year to the city? If you're willing to say, if you're not willing, I certainly understand.
Well, my property taxes are somewhere around $16,000 or $17,000 that I pay to the city in property taxes every year.
Okay.
So it's been mentioned several times that one of the loudest voices being pointed at me doesn't live in the city. I pay, I would say, as much or more taxes than most people that live in the city. So although I don't have a say, my voice should not be diminished on this. So what does it mean in terms of revenue?
Is it 15%? Is it about that?
Oh, yes, it's 15%. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yes.
So people who buy NIPS, will they just go up to pints? Will that happen? Some of them, I guess.
It's hard to tell, and that's what the problem is, because we went through the same thing with menthol cigarettes. It's the unintended consequences of what happens. I've been trying to pay attention to every street drain over the last week or so that I've been driving in. And the one thing that has struck me is the number of menthol cigarette containers that I've seen around the city of New Bedford, and they've been illegal to sell here for over a year, and they're still coming here. So if you ban NIPS in New Bedford, they're still going to come here.
Yeah, I also worry about black markets when you regulate things this way. I don't know what's going on with menthol cigarettes, but I would not be surprised. I know you can buy them in Rhode Island, to find that there's people selling them in Massachusetts under the table somehow. So there's always that problem. I do, get the impetus behind banning them, because it does really seem that there just is no way to get a hold of them, and the industry does not feel ready to move away from plastic. On the other hand, I think being insensitive to business owners like yourself is certainly not a way that we should approach things. Ian, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just going to say, I want to somewhat compare this to the menthol cigarette ban that Governor Baker implemented about 2 years ago now. And what we did is we handed an over $1 billion economic gift to Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine is what we did. And when dollars are stretched, and we came to fully fund our schools in many ways. We're looking at things like, trying to beef up our net school spending, Chapter 90 and Chapter 70 for our roads and bridges. And we want to fully fund our public safety departments. I just think within reason, we need to make sure that we're not taking revenue off the table. I'm glad the state finally brought in legalized gaming. I think that's important. But again, it's just death by 1,000 cuts to our small business community who are paying commercial property taxes and who are paying sales tax and whatnot. I've got some concerns about where we're headed here in this state, and that's just my view on the matter.
So besides the, did you say it was a 10% pilot program to have a deposit in New Bedford, Mark?
No, 5 cents per NIP would not be a deposit. It would be categorized as an environmental fee that we would pay back to the city.
So you just collect it.
The distributors would collect it and go through their records, and twice a year, based on the zip code of where the deliveries come to, they would write a check back to the city twice a year.
Okay, and you estimate that will be how much?
Right now, the estimates are $300,000, and with Fairhaven banning them, it could be even more than that.
Okay.
One of the things that you said, Jack, earlier was by public opinion that you think that if this did go to a vote, it could pass. I would have to say that every politician calculates a vote and makes sure they go down the path of least resistance. If this was so easy to pass in a vote, then they would have done exactly what Fairhaven did and just let it go on the ballot and let the people vote.
Well, I didn't say the city council would pass it. The city council is not the public. I was if you had a referendum.
But in Fairhaven, it started as a petition of the sustainability committee. Anybody in New Bedford could have started a petition and put this on the ballot. Anybody could have.
Right, but a Fairhaven Board of Selectmen or a small board in Fairhaven is a entirely different entity than a town.
No, but it was voted on at the town meeting. So anybody in New Bedford could have started an initiative to put this on the ballot so that the residents of New Bedford could have voted.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the progressive groups, the environmentalists are not going away on this issue, so there is going to have to be some sort of consensus that happens. Is there anything going on state legislation wise? Ian, have you talked to State Rep Cabral or State Rep Hendricks about this?
Well, I mentioned during my opening monologue that I know State Rep Hendricks had filed legislation last cycle to
Right.
put forth a deposit, a bottle bill forward. I believe it was for 5 cents for the nips, or either 5 or 10 cents. I forget, but
Okay.
it's still housed in committee. That's my understanding, Mark. It's still in committee. It's been tabled. It's still there sitting in, we call the can, right, in the
Okay,
committee.
so when
It hasn't been voted on in committee to go out to the floor.
But you know, just as in city council committees, a chairperson can bottle things up for as long as he or she wants to. The same thing happens in the state legislature. There are forces up there that must not want it if it's sitting in there in committee. We have a special tax on hotels in New Bedford that is exercised, that the state has given cities and towns the ability to do some taxes on their own. Is there any possibility of a tax in New Bedford?
Well, that'd be, to do that would be a home rule petition for which the mayor probably wouldn't sign it because he doesn't support our efforts in this way. I don't know. He might, because if he's on the record stating as such, and I didn't hear him say it, but if he's saying that he would support a deposit bill, and he knows it's not going to pass at the state, then maybe he would support a home rule petition to put this forth. And the account would be what we call a revolving fund account, where it'd be self-sustaining. We use that for like the water enterprise funds and the downtown revolving parking account. So I don't know, we could do something like that. I'm open to that as well. I think that's a good idea, but if the mayor doesn't sign it, this is dead on arrival.
Yeah, I mean, long term, that might replace the pilot program with the distributors. We're wrapping up our time here. Anything else that we didn't talk about that you think is important? I know the issue was, and we just touched upon it briefly, was let the public vote. I do feel like there are strong feelings on both sides of the issue, so I'm not completely sure that your side would prevail if it went to a citywide vote. You might, but I think there are lots of people who really are concerned about the social cost aspect of this. I know they claim that in Chelsea that the number of people on the street decreased because you no longer could have the nips in Chelsea, and that is a serious problem in New Bedford. Those of us who live in the downtown and in the commercial neighborhoods of Acushnet Avenue and Rivet Street see that. So I wonder if that isn't another important aspect of it, that the ease with which it makes people who have substance abuse problems able to obtain this substance, and people who are, as they say, trying to drink and drive and have just a small amount of evidence that they can throw out the window.
Yeah.
Well, closing the downtown police station doesn't help with the matter either. I know that's a whole separate topic, but I mean, that doesn't help with vagrancy downtown either, just as an aside.
Yeah, in all honesty, because I live there, the station opened, the station closed, the vagrancy is the same. Mark?
You go back to Chelsea again. I think we have to be really, really careful to accept any of the information that's coming out of Chelsea, because none of it is verifiable. Everybody states a fact of something that happened up there, and I think we should just stick to the facts there of, has vagrancy really gone down? Have those things changed? Anecdotally, that's what some people are saying. But that isn't anywhere that is proven to be fact by anybody. Those are the people that stand on the side of saying a ban would work, and that's one of the things that they point to. But it doesn't come from any source that's verifiable. Anybody can make that up.
Okay.
What I would like to see is what I wrote in the New Bedford Light. I would like to see all the sides come together. Let's talk about this. Let's figure out what resources that we can bring to New Bedford to really make a difference comprehensively for litter in the city, and not attack this one by one. I'll just give you one quick anecdote. The licensing board also handle all licenses in the city, which includes used car lots. So does that mean that the mayor could say, I think gas cars pollute, and I would like the licensing board to ban the sale of gas cars in the city, and the only thing a used car lot can sell now are electric cars, and the licensing board could pass that through without any say and shut down every used car dealer in the city? That's in essence what he did here. Do they have the authority to do that on their own and impact businesses in such a harsh way? And I don't think that power was supposed to be given to them. They were an administrative body is what they were set up to be. They were not set up to be a legislative body. The reason that the ABC said that Chelsea could do it is they didn't say they could do it. They said that they had the authority to do it. That doesn't mean they agreed with the decision. The ABCC stays as far away from local issues as they possibly can. And when they do that, it doesn't mean they agree with the decision. They just say, we don't want to meddle in what's happening in small towns and small cities. They can settle those on their own.
Ian, do you want to make some closing remarks?
Well, I just want to say, I think, and I'm very pleased that the public discourse on this has been respectful on both sides. It's been very engaging for me. I've learned some new things. I'm sure Mark has, and I hope the other side, and I hate saying the other side, but the other folks who might not agree with my opinion on this, hopefully they learned a couple of things in this as well. I think in the course of policy debate at the city, state, or federal level, things can get somewhat toxic with the rhetoric. I haven't seen that yet. And to Mark's point early, and I'll continue to drive it home, let's push the pause button. Let's work together. We acknowledge there's a problem. Let's work on the problem together, industry and private sector alike. That's the way it should be set up, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many others.
All right. So this has been the chat, and we've been dealing with the discussion of the NIP ban in New Bedford. My guests have been Mark Riley of Freitas Package Store and City Councilor at Large Ian Abreu. Thanks, gentlemen, for being on the program, and thanks to our listeners for viewing.
Thanks
You
for having
betcha.
us.
Thank you, Jack.